There was once a pig, and a very proud pig at that. He would always make sure he was wearing the best and cleanest of clothes, and he always wanted people to look at him and say, oh pig, just look at your wonderful clothes." He would oink, 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 with a smile on his lips, and walk into town with a very happy grin on his fat, piggy face. The place that he liked the best was the pie shop, and the kind of pies that he liked the best, the only pies that he would eat were Brussels sprout pies with a fancy patterned crust. People did like his clothes, but they didn't like him with his unfriendly ways. He would scowl and screw his face up if people didn't say anything about the way that he was dressed, or dared to say that they didn't like his clothes. One day, when he was wearing a particularly fine blue cotton waistcoat and a pair of fashionable high-cut pink piggy trousers, he was not happy because the rain had started to fall and he was frightened of getting his black leather boots dirty. A horrible low oink came from his throat as the rain clouds gathered above him and the road was churned into mud. "Oink, oink, oink, my clothes! My beautiful, beautiful clothes! Who is going to see my beautiful clothes if they're all covered in mud? By my curly tail, I will be a mess by the time I get into the town." He was not a happy pig. Just as he thought that he might be able to keep himself clean enough to get people to say what a well-dressed pig he was, he heard a sound. It was an old man with a blue and white walking stick who had got stuck in the mud. "Oh, why don't you please help me? I'm stuck in the mud." His voice was almost drowned out by the sound of the rain. For once in his piggy life, the pig thought that he had better help, even if it meant getting mud on his clothes. In no time at all, he was covered from the top of his head to the tips of his trotters in a slimy, greasy mud, and he couldn't believe it. But he liked it. He liked the way that it felt on his skin. "Oink, oink, 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 I like this." The old man and the pig walked into town, and the two of them told jokes to one another all of the way as they laughed and oinked their way back to the pie shop. Nobody recognised the pig in his filthy clothes, or the huge grin on his face. And from that time on, he didn't try and make people like him just because of the things that he wore. He liked the fact that everyone knew him as the kind pig that would help anyone, even if it meant getting dirty. Once upon a lonely time there was a long fish with big green eyes. It had lived alone beneath the cold blue waves for so long that it couldn't remember ever having a friend. It would stretch its wiggly orange body and move the small triangular fins at its neck and back, and sadly move from place to place above the round red rocks covered with slimy seaweed. Above the waves, an old fisherman would throw his yellow plastic net into the sea to try and catch anything that he could. He lived on a square rusty houseboat with a big blue sail and hoped to catch a fish or a crab for his tea. There was a white crab with long strong pincers who was also very sad and sore because the fisherman needed to mend his yellow net with string and a needle. The needles would snap, and the needles would slip out of the fisherman's hands and fall into the sea. The sticky green seaweed on the crab's shell made the needles stick to his back, and none of the other creatures, not one of the other sea creatures, would ever come close to him. The fish was glad that he'd never been caught, and he would swish his narrow brown oval tail and get as far away from the fisherman and his houseboat as he could. His straight red mouth would let you know that he was unhappy, and one day he heard a great scream coming from the fisherman's boat. The net had fallen on a crab, but the crab had all of his rusty needles sticking to its shell, and it frightened the fisherman so much that he threw the crab as far away as he could. It landed on the edge of a soft golden sandy beach beside the high green grass on a hill. The crab rolled this way and that, and got his back covered with juicy purple grapes from the vines and bushes on the hillside. A crab can only live for so long on dry land, and it had to scrape and scratch its way back into the safety of the salty blue sea. It was tired and heavy from all of the fruit on its back, and could barely move because of all of the grapes. The lonely fish saw the crab and could smell and taste the sweet and juicy grapes on its back. One by one it ate the grapes and took the needles from the crab's back. And with time, they were the best of friends, and as friends, they never felt lonely again. Gorgeous gardening Gabriel Gorilla got gooey, greasy, gungy green grapes in a green grab bag for his great ginger grandma and grandpa. Gabriel was a huge, gorgeous Greenland gorilla that loved nothing else but to work in his garden. As he groomed his green garden, he could see some sweet grapes grouped in bunches on his grapevines. "I know what I'll do," he grinned to himself. "I'll get some grapes and give them to my grandma and grandpa." He grabbed a green and grey grab bag and gave a great call as he put the green grapes into the bag. He might have been a good gardener and great at Greek dancing, but he wasn't very good at guessing what to do with grapes. He put them into the grey grab bag and forgot to get them into the house, and he left them in the garden greenhouse. That night, the rain fell down on the bag, and the early morning sunshine glowed on the green juicy grapes in the green grab bag. They went gungy. They went gooey. And Gabriel didn't glance inside of the bag and didn't know that they had gone greasy and gungy. Gabriel Greek danced his way down the road and grinned and giggled to himself when he met Georgia Gopher. "Well, what have you got in that grey and green grab bag, Gabriel?" The gopher was very curious indeed. "Well, I've got great green juicy grapes for my ginger grandma and grandpa gorilla from my gorgeous green garden." "Can I have a look inside of the grab bag?" Gabriel didn't wait for a second as he opened the bag but didn't glance in himself. Georgia Gopher gasped gratefully, and full of grief at the gooey green gungy grapes. Gabriel thought that they were so gorgeous that she couldn't speak, because she was gobsmacked, and he closed the bag and danced down the road to his grandma's and grandpa's house. As he got close to their gleaming garage, he saw his grandma and grandpa standing on the grumbling gravel. "Look what I've brought for you," giggled Gabriel, the gorgeous gardening gorilla. His great gingery grandparents took a glance into the bag as they grabbed it from Gabriel's grasp. What they saw made them gasp gravely. "Why have you brought us gungy green, gooey, gluey grapes, you great goose of a galoot?" His grandfather had a gravelly voice. But they were gorgeous, juicy grapes when I put them into the green grab bag last night. Gorgeous and juicy from the green garden and off the grapevines." Gabriel nearly gagged on the words. His ginger grandma opened up the bag and dropped the gungy green grapes on the gravel-covered ground. To get a better glance at the gungy grapes, Gabriel galloped closer to the mess of greasy fruit and slipped and fell this way and that, right onto the ground. When he tried to get up, he gyrated this way and that. And his grandma and grandpa giggled and gloated at his great green juicy gungy grapes as they watched him as he slipped and slid on to the green grass. From that time, he always made sure that he kept his fruit good and well, and didn't let it go gluey or gungy or grotty, just in case anyone giggled or gossiped about Gabriel and his green grapes. It was a beautiful, hot, sunny summer's day when the big farmer was reading a book. He had just been into the town to buy it, and he wanted to read it so much that he forgot to lock or close the gate to the green field on the side of the hill. The old horse was feeling so hot and so hungry that it wandered out of the field and down to the side of the cool river. It made a nee, nee sound as it walked right past the farmer. He was leaning against a wall and didn't even notice the huge horse. What was worse, the 10 little ducks decided that they would go down to the river as well. It was too hot for them in the farmyard, and the water looked so cool and fresh. They all walked in one long line, one after another, and each of them said, "Quack, quack, 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 quack," as they went past him. The sheepdog tried to make him go back into the field, but she didn't want to bark in case she frightened the sheep. They were making enough noise with their bang, 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 without the sheepdog frightening them. The sheepdog couldn't keep quiet any longer. It barked and tugged at a master's leg, and eventually he looked up to see the horse wandering away from the farm. "Good girl," said the farmer. "I should really stop reading when I'm supposed to be working. I'd better get the horse right away." The horse was easy to get back by pulling on its reins, but the farmer knew there was something wrong when the sheepdog couldn't stop barking. "Be quiet, old girl. You don't want to upset the old farmyard, do you?" The sheepdog kept on barking and tugging at his trousers. He knew that he had to follow her, and she took him down to the river and then to the lake. He laughed out loud when he saw the ducks swimming in the cool, clear water. "You are such a good dog that I can't call you a sheepdog anymore now, can I? I think I'll have to call you a duck dog from now on." The farmer learned his lesson, and he always made sure that he could see his sheep and pigs, horses and ducks by keeping a good lookout for them and not reading when he was supposed to be working. There was a bitter, icy wind that took the breath from his body, and the tall mountainous waves crashed and left a salty blue taste of the sea in his nose and mouth. The boy was glad to be there, and away from the storm he had caused with his family. The row had been brewing for months and years, and now that it had broken, all he wanted to do was to be alone and away from all of them. Still, spiked rocks cut through the white of the snow on the sand, and pits of darkness were cast by the shadows of the dunes. He could remember being here in happier times with his friends and family. In the short days of summer they would play on the welcoming dunes and make sand castles that seemed to reach to the sky. With the sand white and frosted at his feet, he could see that the sea's briny splash zone had cut jagged, saw-toothed lines at the edge of the hysterical sea. It contrasted with the golden yellow of the sand and made him screw up his small brown eyes at the glare of the white in the sea. The wind was like sharp, rigid knives scratching, clawing at the skin like jaguars' claws. By the light of a late harvest moon, he had run away from the house that he had known all of his life in this cold country of his birth. It had been a giant of a row that needed him to show the whole of his family that he would not take any more of their cruel words. Being in this stark and desolate place was a comfort after being locked in the claustrophobic prison of the family home. He had slipped out by night and knew that strong words had been spoken and they would not follow after him. All I wanted was some freedom. All I wanted was to be free. His words were blown to the four corners of the storm, as he saw the might of the ocean's power crash upon the rain-smoothed rocks. Again, he struggled to battle to breathe as the wind crushed his clothes to his body and made it difficult to pull air into his lungs. In this city, I will be free of rules and boundaries. In this city, I shall have my own life and not what my mother and father dictate to me. He tried to make his voice sound as if he meant the words that fell from his thoughts, but it was difficult. When confronted by the majesty of the ocean, it was difficult to feel tall and brave then. Without thinking about the way that the cold sand would take the warmth from his body, he fell down to the sand and scraped at the soft grains that had been hardened by the winter's chill. It numbed at his fingers, and all thoughts of past happiness on summer's days fled from his mind. I shall stay here for this one night, until I can go to the... He hesitated with anticipation at the idea of becoming a city dweller. Until I can go to the city. He did stay in that place, half hoping that his family would seek him out and make his case to be treated as an equal in all things. His dreams were filled with thoughts of the sea, with his family and friends, as he found some shelter from the terror of the storm. Soon the little food that he had taken with him had run out, and there was no choice or chance of his family coming to look for him, and he had only one thing that he could do: to go to the city. In his family he had been lost amongst all of the children, and now he was lost in the countryside that he thought that he had known so well. With the sea he could tell where the sun would rise and set. With the sea he always knew that there was a chance of food and a cave for shelter. But his travelling to the city brought a whole host of smells and sounds that filled him with doubts and fears. To look at him, you would never have known that he was scared, but his heart beat in his chest like a terrified drum. He had depression wrap its clawed fingers about his heart, and the only thing that brought a smile to his lips was the idea of the city and freedom. He thought that it would be a good place, a kind place, a place that would be filled with friends and good times. He persuaded himself that he would not be disappointed. When he had lost all hope of finding home or the city, he could see it, set apart from the land upon a hill. It was just as he had imagined it, so easy to see from so many miles away. The buildings looked so small and insignificant from a distance, but now his heart beat with anticipation and excitement. Within 100 feet of the city's edge, he didn't have to look, but he could sense that the tall skyscrapers were crowding out the black, clouded sky. Their shapes were as irregular as the clouds that had been scarred by their touch. All light was blocked out. The windows, like eyes. All of the colours were dull. There were no blacks or browns or reds, nothing but dullness and a dark reaching its colourless fingers towards his resolve and what was left of his courage. Everywhere about him the window ledges looked like frowning eyebrows, and all of his hopes for friendship and a life of freedom disappeared like a ghost's shadowy mist. Each building looked like a giant, not living and thriving, but barely surviving the background of the untrustworthy sky. Lightning cut through the gloom and looked like God's angry veins thrusting through the terrified sky. I wish in all of my heart that I will find the courage to live in such a place. His voice was filled with fear and anger at his disappointment. He felt so small that he wasn't greeted or spoken to in the throng of the city. No stranger had asked him for his story, and what he saw before him was not what he had longed and hoped for. He had made a change, but a change for the worse. He stood lonely under the staring, scorching eyes of the city and wished, for once, just for once in his life, that he could be back home. The first is in a circle. The second is in the air. A kick has 2. Everyone has 3. Jenny Jolly wasn't very jolly at all. It was going to be her birthday in 3 days, and she had been told that her dad couldn't be there for her party. Jenny loved her birthday parties with their cakes and jelly, sandwiches and buns, but she wanted to have her dad there too. She knew that he had to work away and he couldn't get a holiday just when he wanted, and she knew all of the reasons why he couldn't come. But it didn't make her feel any happier to think that he couldn't be there on her special day. Cheer up. You know your dad will send you a card or a present, and you'll be able to talk to him on the phone on the day. Her mother was trying to jolly Jenny up, but she still felt sad. 3 days before the party, Jenny heard the postman push some cards through the letterbox, and she was down the stairs and had the cards in her hands before they had the time to drop onto the hall carpet. She was very excited when she saw the card from a foreign land. The stamp and the writing looked a little strange, but she knew her father's handwriting from the address, and she was especially pleased when it had been written on the outside, "Please open before your birthday." She yelled at the top of her voice, "I've got a card from Dad! I've got a card from Dad!" Her mother, who was just beside her, said, "It's all right, our Jen. I know, I can see. And I'm not that far away that you have to shout about it." "But it's a card from Dad!" Jenny Jolly was very jovial and jolly with this card in her quivering hands. She ripped, she tore, she pulled and tugged at the envelope so much that her mother took it from her hands before she ripped it to shreds. Calm down. Let me open it for you before you turn it into confetti." Her mother was laughing as she spoke, and pleased that she was so excited. The card was made out of thick, shining card and had a picture of a party table covered with presents and plates. Her mother put the card into Jenny's hand and spoke quietly and carefully. "You read it. It is for you after all, and it is going to be your birthday. What does it say?" Jenny opened up the card and looked at the writing inside, which was written in coloured inks and signed, "Love, Dad." She was surprised because it wasn't a happy birthday poem or a letter from her dad. It said, "The first is in a circle. The second is in the air. A kick has 2. Everyone has 3. Love, Dad." There was a long pause, and you could hear the clock in the kitchen ticking. Her mother moved towards Jenny and asked again, "Well, what does it say?" Jenny turned the card around so that her mother could read the riddle. "What do you think it means? What has your dad written? What do you think he's trying to tell you?" The mother was just as puzzled as her daughter was. Jenny slowly started to smile, and then she laughed. "Dad must have put some presents in places for me to find. This is like a treasure map. All I've got to do is work out what the riddle means, and then I'll be able to find the presents that he's left for me." All that day she repeated the riddle out loud to herself to try and make sense of the strange words. When she went to bed, she dreamt of buried treasure and pirate maps and jewels. The next day was the same, and she was starting to drive her friends mad with the chanting of, "The first is in a circle. The second is in the air. A kick has 2. Everyone has 3. On the day before her birthday party, she suddenly shouted out loud, "The first is in a circle! That must be the round lake in the middle of the town. Mum, can I go to the town with my friends to look and see if there's anything next to the round lake? That must be what Dad meant by the first is in a circle." Before her mother had a chance to say yes, Jenny was out of the road and with her friends and running around the lake in the middle of the town. They ran this way and that and looked under the bushes and plants, but they couldn't find anything. No presents, no buried treasure, and definitely no jewels. Just some bits of litter and squashed juice bottles. "Oh, well," Jenny sighed. "It was worth a try." Her friends were disappointed for her, and to try and cheer her up, they all said, "See you tomorrow at your party. Happy birthday for tomorrow." Back in the house, Jenny Jolly was not very jolly again. Her mum put her arm around her shoulder and sat her down at the kitchen table. "Why don't we try and work out what your dad is trying to tell you? He's always been like this, a joker and a riddler. I sometimes don't know why he can't just tell you straight out." She reached for the card and read, "The second is in the A. A kick has 2. Everyone has 3. Just what's he going on about?" Jenny could tell that her mother was trying to help and sat beside her and forgot to be too sad. Perhaps he's put something up into the tree. That's it, he's hidden something up in the tree." Jenny ran out of the kitchen and was looking into the apple tree in the back garden. But her enthusiasm disappeared when she couldn't see anything in the branches. "A kick has 2, a kick has 2, a kick has 2. What does it mean?" She kicked the air twice in frustration and hoped that would be a balloon or a bird that would magically drop a present at her feet. But nothing happened. Her mother was standing beside her, and she was just as curious as she spoke out loud. "Everyone has 3. 3 what? We have 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 arms, 2 legs." She stamped her foot in mock anger. "Ooh, your dad is such a trickster. Tell you what, we'll be able to phone him tomorrow at your party, and I'm sure he'll tell you then. Why don't we sleep on it tonight, and tomorrow we'll make the sandwiches and have a great party." The day of Jenny's birthday was fine, and the sandwiches were made, and the table looked just like the card her father had sent. Jenny's friends were having a great time, and Jenny was nearly enjoying herself, except that she was missing her father. Everyone started to sing "Happy Birthday to You," but one of the voices sounded deeper and louder than the rest. She turned around, and there she could see and hear her father standing there. Jenny rushed over to him and nearly knocked him over. "Whoa, whoa, steady, 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 Jenny Jolly. You nearly sent me flying. I've got something for you here." Did you guess? He was smiling at her. "Guess what, Dad?" She was screwing her face up in joy and confusion. "That I was going to bring you something special, of course. I sent you the riddle. Don't tell me you didn't get it." He looked at her from the corner of his eye, then he stroked his chin. "You didn't get it, did you?" He sat her down to explain. "You see, the first is in a circle. That's easy. The letter C." She didn't want to tell him that she'd been all around the lake to find a present, but she didn't have time to tell him anything. He was too busy explaining the riddle. "The second is in the A. Again, that's easy. The letter A." Jenny wanted to ask about the 2 in a kick, but as she thought about it, she realised that there were 2 letter K's in the word kick. So she blurted out, "The third letter is K, 2 in a kick, I get it now. So that means... She was stalling for time. "That means that everyone has 3 means that the last letter is... She really didn't have a clue, but her mother shouted out, "E! The last letter is E, because everyone has 3 E's in it. Well done. I knew you'd get it. Her dad had never looked so happy in all of his life. So put them all together, and that spells... Jenny was mouthing each of the letters. C, and an A, and a K, and an E. That spells cake! 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 Her dad picked her up and swung her around. Of course. And that's just what I've brought you. A cake. A birthday cake. He produced from behind his back a round, heavy, iced birthday cake with 7 candles on the top. As everyone sang and wished her a happy birthday, Jenny blew out the candles and had the biggest and best piece of birthday cake that she had ever eaten, sitting in between her mother and her dad. When the old dusty clock of the brown brick high school struck, Marie Littlejohn knew that it was 3:30 and it was time for the end of school. Everyone else felt glad that it was time for the work to stop and time to go home, but not this girl. She knew that she would have to go past the Gingerbread Cottage sweet shop. It wasn't the name. It truly wasn't the fact that it was called after a witch's home and a fairy story. It was the fact that she was always overcome with guilt at knowing what she had done. It wasn't as if it was the biggest crime of the century, but for her, it might as well have been. She had never stolen anything in her life, but she just didn't have any money, and her friend's birthday was something that she just couldn't miss, and if she spoke to herself for long enough, she could come up with 100,000 different reasons why it wasn't really stealing. But she had taken the gingerbread man from the shop, and she was the one who had stolen it. Just because she hadn't got any money, she never had any money. Just because she didn't have any money and she wanted it was not a good enough reason to take it. She could feel herself blushing from the top of her silky smooth blonde hair to the tips of her white shoes, but there was no way around it. She couldn't stay in school overnight. She would have to go home and go past the scene of her crime. She wrapped a coat around her shoulders and pulled the hem of a long, pink, frilled dress and made her way out of the old rusting gates and made her way down the high street. What made things worse was that as she got closer to the shop, she could see some girls that she knew from school. They were the kind of girls who knew that nothing was their fault, and the way that they could lower their voices to a soft whisper and raise their eyebrows to look as if they had never done one wrong thing in their lives. They could wrap their teachers around their gentle voices and never seem to get into trouble. Marie knew differently. She knew that most of the thieving that went on in the local shops was due to them, and she didn't like the way that they were smiling and looking at her as she came close. The tallest of the girls beamed a tender smile at her and spoke in a voice that would have melted the strongest heart. "Oh, I love your dress. You do look pretty in pink. It really suits you. It's a shame you've got that thick coat over your shoulders." The words were like honey in the air. She continued, almost without taking a breath. "I've seen you at school, and you seem such a good girl. Oh, I wish I had you as a friend." She turned, bent her shoulders and looked straight into her eyes. "Would you like to be my friend?" There was an openness in her eyes that almost persuaded Marie to say yes, but an inner voice warned her that this was too much like a trap. "I've got friends, and I do like to be friendly, but I don't know you very well, and I don't know anything about you, and..." The tall girl gave a sickly grin that distracted Marie from the fact that another girl was now moving closer to her. That doesn't matter. You don't need to know too much about us because... There was an edge of menace in this second girl's voice. Because we know all that we need to know about you. Once again Marie blushed and tried to look away, only to be met by another pair of brown eyes that belonged to the shortest of the four girls. They had obviously been waiting for her to come this way, and she wondered if they knew her secret. You know you want to be friends with us, and you know that you want to do what we ask you to do. It's not as if you haven't done it before. I mean... All of the girls looked at her. I mean, what does it matter? A little gingerbread man. Marie's small hands tightened into a hard, bloodless fist in her coat pocket, and she could feel an icy grip upon her shoulder as the first, tallest girl spoke. This time their faces were no more than a hand's breadth apart. Did the gingerbread man taste nice? I've never had one myself. And I was just wondering if you could tell us all what a stolen piece of gingerbread would taste like. She felt very uncomfortable that this terrible secret seemed to be known by these awful girls. I didn't really steal it. It wasn't for me. It was for my best friend, and I didn't have any money, and I couldn't afford to buy her anything, and... Her voice trailed away, and she hated herself for this ferocious babbling truth that was filling the air. She had stolen it, and that was an end to it. Her thoughts were broken by the cooing voice of the girl's leader. There. Don't get yourself all so worked up. After all, it was only a gingerbread man, and I'm sure that the cake shop owner won't miss a few gingerbread men. Now, would she? We? She looked at her nodding cronies. All we want you to do is to not exactly steal some for us. And then nothing more needs to be said about it. Now does it? 4 little, very little gingerbread man for us, and perhaps one for yourself if you feel like it. Where's the harm in that? Marie felt as if she'd been hit by a truck. Her breath came in laboured gasps, and her mouth, tongue and teeth were dry. If you've done it once, then you can do it again. And we'd all like to be your friend. Wouldn't you like to do this little thing for us? If she could have been anywhere else than right here, right now, Marie would have wished to have been away from these menacing girls with their soft and quiet voices. You don't want to be left out of our gang of friends. The word friend had never made her feel sick in her life, and she knew that the last thing she wanted to be involved with was a repeat of her earlier crime. The silence lasted for a good 5 seconds, but it felt just like a lifetime. The girl's leader straightened her back, and they all took a pace away from this cornered girl and continued after being given a nod of approval from the gang. You do have a choice, of course. You could stop being our friend, and I would have to tell the shop owner that a thief walks past her shop every day. I'm sure you wouldn't like the teachers or your mother and father to find out about their little thief. As the sweet words slithered past her lips, she savoured the effect she was having on her friends and her prey, as if it was a tasty morsel of fruit. This girl left no doubt in her mind that she would really do it. Inform everyone about how she had stolen a gingerbread man from the shop. Marie didn't hesitate for a second. She grabbed her coat and went straight into the shop. As the door opened, the leader whispered, "Good girl, don't forget, one each and one for yourself if you like." Marie could see their eyes following her as she walked up to the counter. She reached a trembling hand towards the stacked tray of gingerbread biscuits, and although she couldn't see it, she could feel the gloating smiles of all 4 of the girls. She could almost see them drooling in anticipation at the gingerbread in their greedy, conniving mouths. What they saw through the old shop's window made them gasp. The shopkeeper stopped her work as Marie started to talk to her, and she pointed at the gingerbread men. The girls ran away, and they never got to hear what she had said. Inside of the sweet, dough-filled, scented shop, Marie was confessing to having stolen the biscuit for a friend. The woman behind the counter was angry and had her cake-covered hands spread wide open in disbelief. "I am sorry. I've never been so sorry in all of my life." Her words were small and quiet, but powerful. "I didn't have any money. And my friend doesn't have anything in this world to call her own, and she and I, and she is, and I didn't, and it was a birthday, and I..." She knew that there was nothing that she could say to persuade the baker that what she did was right, so she hung her head and tried unsuccessfully not to cry. A whole minute passed, and then the shopkeeper, seeing how upset and repentant Marie was, spoke carefully and clearly. "If you don't want me to go to the police, then you're going to have to give me a good reason. You're going to have to give me a good reason not to get in touch with them. Or your parents." There was half of a smile in her voice. "Go on. Convince me. Persuade me as to why I shouldn't get in touch with the authorities." Marie raised her head and thought quickly and precisely. "If I could pay you back, I would, but I don't have any money. I don't have anything that I could sell, and I know that what I did was wrong. I am sorry, and..." After an initial burst of confidence, her voice became unsure. The woman spoke. "I know that you're sorry. I don't doubt that. But sorry is not enough. I want to know what you're going to do for me to help me. Tell me. None of us are perfect, but what you did was wrong. And I want to know what you are going to do to make me believe that you won't do it again." The woman had a hint of a grin on her lips as Marie squirmed under her gaze. There was nothing else for it. Marie would have to think of something to change her mind and stop her from telling the police, and even worse, telling her mother and father. She would have to think of something and think of it quick. She took a slow, calm, deep breath and began to talk. "I am sorry." She was stopped as the shopkeeper raised her hand to cut her short. "I don't want sorry. I want to be convinced that you won't steal, and you will do something for me to make up for your stealing." Her jaw was set as she spoke. I would like to try and work for you, and I wouldn't take any money. I will do anything, and I wish that I hadn't done it in the first place." She was finding it hard not to cry as she spoke, but she knew that she would have to work hard at persuading the baker to let her go free. "I am very good at cooking and cleaning, and I would like to work here when I get older. I love the smell of new baked bread, and I have some of my granny's recipes for toasted walnut and fig biscuits, and I would like to make some for you as a little thank you for being so understanding." Once her speech was finished, Marie felt as if the weight of the guilt had been taken from her narrow shoulders, and she felt better for having confessed to being a thief. The woman didn't say anything for some time, and then suddenly a great guffaw broke from her lips. I couldn't possibly refuse such a good reason. And I don't want to be cruel, and I suppose... I don't suppose that you would consider making some of the biscuits tonight, would you? Would you do that for me? I can't wait to taste those walnuts. I bet they melt in the mouth. Marie did make the biscuits, and did make amends for stealing, and in the years that followed the shopkeeper and her became the best of friends. But if ever there was anything that the woman liked about this growing girl, it was the way that she could use her voice and thoughts to persuade anyone to do anything. Anything but steal. Chapter 1. On that Tuesday it was a lovely day when a man with short spiky ginger hair was walking away from the bank in the big busy city. All through his life he had always jumped to conclusions. He never took the time to think and always thought the worst of everything. If he saw a girl eating a banana, he thought that they were going to throw the skin onto the ground so that he would slip and slide and fall down. If he saw someone with a piece of paper in their hands, he would be scared that they were going to make a paper aeroplane and throw it at him. To make things worse, he was very nosy and couldn't keep his big triangular nose and small blue eyes out of other people's business. On this fine spring day, he glanced up as he walked and saw a tall young man with a green jacket on. As he peered closer, he could see that he had green camouflage trousers on as well. When he saw the hard, shiny green helmet on his head, he knew that he was a soldier. And without waiting to think, he fell to the ground with his hands in the air and shouted, don't shoot, please, don't shoot, please, don't kill me." Everyone in the street could see and hear him. Even some of the customers at the bank looked out of the door. The young soldier was surprised, to say the least. "Of course I'm not going to kill you. I'm visiting my family, and I don't need you shouting in the street about it. I'm going to see my mother and father, my sister and my brother." The banker still had his thin arms in the air and was blushing as the young man lifted him up to his feet and dusted down his short-sleeved striped green shirt. The soldier's voice was calm and reassuring as he spoke to the banker. "I'm on leave, and I just want to go and see my family. Are you all right?" Yes, I'm fine. I am sorry. It's just that I keep jumping to conclusions, and when I saw your uniform, I thought you must be here to shoot people, and..." He could hear how ridiculous his words were once they had left his lips. He felt ridiculous and just a little bit foolish as the soldier walked away, shaking his head and muttering, "I don't even have a gun. How could I possibly shoot him? Some people." The banker put his broad hand to his red cheek, and when he could see that people were staring at him and whispering as they went past, he spoke out loud to himself. "I do wish I would take the time to think and look and stop jumping to conclusions." For the next few days, the customers would come up onto the clean white bank and stretch their arms out and point their finger at him and pretend they were going to shoot him. There was nothing that he could do but give them a thin-lipped smile and sigh to himself at being such a fool. Chapter 2. A long and embarrassing week later, after he had tried to mind his own business and think before he said or did anything, he was walking down the busy tree-lined avenue where his house stood. He was desperately trying to think about not jumping to conclusions, but when he saw a thin teenager with a large round yellow stone the size of a cricket ball in her hand, and he thought that she was going to throw it at his window, he ran as fast as his legs would carry him, pointing and yelling, "Stop! Stop! Put that stone down! Put that stone down now!" He was getting very breathless as he ran, but still he screamed, "Don't you dare throw that stone through my window!" The girl stopped and looked at him. "Are you bonkers? Why would I possibly want to throw a stone through your window? I live here, in this street. It's my house." She pointed to the house next to his and waved the stone in her hand. "I've taken the stone out of the busy road to stop it breaking my window. To be honest, it could have broken your window. You should mind your own business and not think I'm going to do something bad." The girl had a look on her face that let him know that he was in the wrong again. He wished that there was something that he could say and do to stop himself always thinking that something terrible was going to happen. He wished that he could think before he spoke and not cause so much upset and anger. It was always the same. Even when he was little, he had always been the one who had something to say and did something that would make him look ridiculous. Chapter 3. On a cold, frosty Christmas morning, he looked at his shiny new work shoes. All through the autumn and the winter, he tried so hard not to jump to conclusions. He had not had much success. Lots of things had happened that he wished had never happened. He wished that there was something that he could do or say, but he had a broad smile as he looked at the present of the new light blue jeans he had been given by his brother. In amongst all of the things that he had in front of him, he opened one that he knew was from his best friend. It was light to the touch, and he was itching to find out what it was that was inside of the thin wrapping paper. As he tore the box open, he found that there was a long, sparkling, pointed, rubber nose. Only a friend would have been so bold as to send something like that. It had to have come from someone who knew him well and wanted him to change his ways. It made him go red in his face that his friend also wanted him to stop being so nosy and so ready to jump to conclusions. As he shook the box, something fell out from the bottom that clanged and rattled on the carpet beneath the Christmas tree. It was the best and the strangest present that he got. It was a watch. It was not such a huge watch or a bright and shining watch. It was what was written on the back of the watch. There was a little note engraved which read, "Try counting to 20 before you come to any conclusions." Most people would count to 10 before they let themselves think about something, but his friend knew that he needed to count to 20 before he thought. Without thinking, he looked out of the window and saw some boys in the street. He would have thought that they were going to steal something from his house, but he looked at the watch and started to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20. When they came knocking on his door and they were only raising money for charity, he realised that it was such a good thing to take his time and think before jumping to conclusions. With a lot of counting and getting used to taking his time, he minded his own business, and people stopped thinking that he was being suspicious and stopped being so nosy. There was no way that he could thank his best friend for his really thoughtful present, but he would find at least 20 ways of thanking him. As they stood by the gates of the unfamiliar high school, he was scared in case anyone might see him with his mother. He knew that in his old town, nobody, and I mean nobody, would be seen dead going to the senior school with their mother. Bill Seddon had no choice. His mother had been given a very important head-of-year job at the comp, and they had moved lock, stock and barrel to a new town, to a new school, and had left everything behind, including all of his friends. The last thing he wanted was to be seen with his mother, a teacher, at the gates of the school. As they got closer to the rusting gates, he could feel his eyes starting to itch and his nose start to run.
"Oh no, not hay fever, as well as everything else."
He could hardly breathe, with the allergy getting the better of his breath. Without thinking or looking, his mother reached into the unfathomable depths of her handbag and produced a crumpled, makeup-stained tissue and grabbed the back of his head and proceeded to get him to blow his nose as if he were a toddler. "Hey, look at you, Snotty." He hated this nickname his parents had given him. Some people had pet names that made you feel special, but not his family. Oh, no. It always had to be something different, always out of the ordinary. He could have suffered Fluffy Bunny or My Little Cherub, but Snotty. I ask you, there is a limit. Come on, Snotty. Snotty lets your mum wipe your nose. Blow. You might be 11, but... Bill was resisting his mother's relentless advance. He would be dead if anyone saw him.
"Mom, stop it, I'm too old for this."
Before he had a chance to pull her hand away, over the top of the dust cloud caused by the prehistoric tissue, he could see some boys, the same sort of age as he was, coming from the other side of the gates. He clamped her hand onto his face to make sure that they couldn't see his face and be able to identify him as the boy who came to school with his mum.
"Leave it there, Mum. Oh, don't pull it away."
His mother didn't understand, but shook her head and smiled. "Come on, Snotty. Let's get you cleaned up. You've got a bit of my mascara on your cheek." She gave him a cat's lick face scrub with the "only one, careful previous owner" tissue. That was far from hygienic, just about in full view of the whole school. "I don't know what you're so worried about. It's not as if you know anyone here." Her voice was cooing and tinged with pride that they had travelled so far and had such a good house so close to the school. All Bill could think about was how he could avoid coming into school with his mother every day and not get pummeled by the other kids. What happened next took him completely by surprise, as his mother almost bodily picked him up and dragged him into the staff room to meet the rest of the teachers. "Morning, everybody. I know I met you all last term, but I thought that I would introduce you to my son." She clapped her hands, as she always did when she wanted to get people's attention. "This is my son, William Seddon. He's new to the school, but I'm sure you'll make him feel welcome." She beamed at her son, who was wishing that the ground would swallow him up and let him fall down to the fiery pits of Hades. Anything would be better than this. About 30 eyes all turned on him, some with amusement at his embarrassment, others with a kind of loathing that is reserved for looking at something that you found underneath a stone and accidentally put into a sandwich. She turned to him and gave him a jagged tug on his arm. "Say hello to all of your new teachers, William. Don't show me up." He thought, "Don't show me up. Don't show me up. What do you think you're doing right now, you stupid woman?" He might have been thinking that, but all that came from his mouth was a timid, "Hello, teachers," and a very feeble wave. He could tell that the young science teacher in the chemical-stained white lab coat felt sorry for him as she led him to the door and whispered in his ear, "If it's any consolation, my father was a teacher, and he was just as embarrassing. You get yourself to your form room, and it'll be all right." Bill thought that it would never be all right if this was the first day. He couldn't wait for the last day of being in school. As he pelted down the corridor, he crashed into a group of boys who were all about the same size and age as he was, and they were shocked but not put out by the fact that he had nearly knocked them all over.
Whoa, man, what's up with you? What's the rush? You can't be that keen to get into school."
All of this was spoken by a dark-haired boy with a cheeky glint in his eye. Bill caught his breath and tried to look composed and collected. I thought I was late, that's all. I didn't want to be late for the first day. That's all." The dark-haired boy came a little closer and spoke again, and he looked at Bill from the top of his matted hair to the tips of his scuffed trainers.
"Anyway, who are you? Haven't seen you before. Where'd you come from? What's your name? Who are you anyway?"
The torrent of questions almost knocked Bill over, but he was used to this kind of interrogation from his mum.
"That's a lot of questions, but I'll take them one at a time."
He liked using this phrase. He had heard it on a game show, and it had impressed him enough to have kept it on standby for just such an occasion.
"I'm Bill Seddon, and this is my first day at the school. You won't have seen me because I've just moved here from Newchester."
He was staring into space and counting on his fingers as he was desperately trying to remember the questions in turn. He continued.
"People call me Seddon, or Seddy, and I've already told you my full name."
He seemed quite pleased with himself that he had answered all of the questions, but the group of boys were just looking at him as if he was mad. The shortest of the 5 boys moved towards him, and with a suspicious glare, "Seddon. Seddon. Seddon. Is your name Seddon? That's the name of the new teacher who's come to the school. Are you related? We've heard that she's a bit of a hard case, and you got to watch your step with her. Are you her son or something?" Bill was trembling inside, and he didn't want to lie, but he didn't want to get off on the wrong foot with these boys who were the closest thing to friends on the first day that he was ever likely to find. He blushed slightly and hoped that they didn't notice as he stammered, No, it's a very common name, that's all. Never seen her before in my life. Just a coincidence, her having the same name as me, that's all. The group relaxed and spoke together. "Well, come on, Seddy. You will be late if you keep on charging around like that." As it happened, they were a good bunch of lads, and to make matters even better, they were going to be in the same form together. Sitting in the back row at the first introductory lesson with his newfound mates, Bill was starting to relax, but things turned from bad to terrible as his mother walked into the room and waved to him. She sat down and looked very businesslike as she pulled a new register from out of her battered briefcase. "Good morning, Class 4SJW. My name is Mrs. Seddon, and I am your new form tutor. You don't know me, and I only know 1 or 2 of you, so let's get off on the right foot and behave while I take the register. You will say, 'Yes, miss,' and nothing else when I call your name." She called the names out one by one, and Bill was dreading the time when she would get to the letter S and call his name, and he would be clocked as having the same name as her. "Anderson, A, Brown, Cunningham." It went from D to E, from M to R, to S. One particularly tough-looking character glowered at him and clenched a fist in his direction, while mouthing, "Same name, I'll get you later." This was not a good start. As his mother got closer to the end of the alphabet, some of the children took it upon themselves to throw pieces of chewed paper at the teacher when they thought she wasn't looking. The thing is, teachers are always looking, and she was staring straight at Bill. "You, stand up, Seddon. Was that you?" She had an angry tone in her voice, and Bill felt as if he was being picked on unfairly for something that he hadn't done by his own mother. This just couldn't get worse. As he stood up, another piece of soggy paper flew through the air from the boy who had made the threats on him earlier, and slopped its way down the side of the whiteboard. His mother could see that it wasn't Bill, and she wrote down the name of the culprit in thick, bright red felt tip and said nothing. Even when the boy protested at having his name on the board and shouting, "Wasn't me, I never did it, I never done it, I never done it, it's so unfair," Bill's mother said nothing. He had experienced this before, and he knew that she wasn't going to be stopped from making sure the named boy was punished. She looked at him and said, "Sit down, Seddon. No, wasn't you now." She clicked the felt tip pen shut with a satisfying click and returned it to the briefcase. Those first few days were a bit difficult, as his mother and he forgot that it was easier for him and her if they pretended for a while that they weren't related. Bill made sure that he didn't call her Ma'am, and she tried not to call him Billy in front of his new mates. A few days later, it was his birthday, and that made him the youngest in the class. He had tried to miss his birthday, as he didn't want anyone to find out too soon that he was the son of a teacher. But, as ever, his mother was not to be stopped. She had fancy dress invitations sent out to the children in the class, all of the ones that she thought were suitable friends for her son. She had even sent an invite to the girl in art class that Bill liked, and much to his embarrassment, his mother had whispered in the corridor, "Have you got a girlfriend?" On the evening of the birthday, when the doorbell went, his mother shouted down, "Billy! Billy! Go to the front room and don't look, or you'll see my fancy dress. It's going to be a surprise." Bill hated his mother's surprises, but did as he was told and went into the front room to see the sandwiches and cake set out on the huge table. You could hear his new friends gasp as the door was opened by his mother. When they were led into the front room, he was as shocked as they were, because this was the first time that he could see that his mother was dressed. His mother was dressed in a black mortarboard with a large heavy cane and a flowing cape. She had a pair of old-fashioned spectacles on the tip of her nose, and she was talking very sternly to the children. "You children had better behave, or you'll have the cane to answer to." She slapped it across her palm in a very menacing way. The children were shocked and surprised, but they really liked his mother, even if Bill was mortified. The birthday party was a huge success, and everyone joined in the fun, including Bill. At the end of the night, when the parents came to collect their children, they all thanked her for the party and whispered to Bill, "Your mum might be a teacher, and she's really odd, but she's a lot of fun. She's one of the best teachers in the school." His mother saw that they were whispering to one another, and as they went, she waved her cane and said to them, "You've been quite good, but don't, and I mean don't forget to do your homework." And she laughed. It was not the best of days, but she was glad it wasn't raining too hard as she hobbled her way down the slimy streets to the side of the sloppy river towards the town. She smiled to herself as she walked in through the creaking, slatted doors of the pizza restaurant and reached into the small bag and swapped the salt for a sugar shaker and sugar for the salt cellar in the shakers on the round wooden tables in one of her many rivals' restaurants. "Just wait until they put salt in their coffee and sugar on their pepperoni." Her small shoulders shook as she pulled her thin fingers through her long grey hair, and the drum music played inside of the candle-lit room. She was a grumpy woman, and the only thing that seemed to make her happy was causing trouble in all of the other Italian restaurants in town. As she made her way out back into the street and headed for another place to spoil, she grumbled to herself. Too many restaurants and not enough people to visit them all. I've got to get rid of some of the competition. And I'm such a salty old woman. They deserve a little bit more salt in their lives. It was true. There were too many places to eat, and she hadn't had a customer for 2 weeks. It was hardly surprising that no one came to her place, Pirate Pizza's, because it was dirty and dusty and musty and mouldy. The food was good, but she was such a grumpy waitress that she scared most of the customers away. Now, as she strained her eyes to look through the window of the latest sabotaged restaurant, she smiled to herself when she heard the customers scream and complain about the salty cappuccino and the sugary quattro stagioni. A witch's cackle came from her dry prune lips. They all want to come to my restaurant on Sunday. They will. They'll all want to come when I'm the only one who's left, with sugar for sugar and salt for salt. She had planned every last detail of what was going to happen. After a busy Friday night, the busiest night of the week, of swapping salts and sugars throughout the town, she was going to have a grand and very full Saturday. She even had a balloon floating above the houseboat restaurant with letters as high as a man, proclaiming and cajoling to the world, "Eat at Pirate Pizza's." She was very pleased with herself as she greeted customer after customer on board of her restaurant. They didn't seem to mind that the stinking river crawled past the dirty portholes. All they really wanted was a meal that was salty and sweet at the right times. The view from the top deck was beautiful, and that was something she had always liked. You could see the sea and the waves crashing against the rocks to give a peaceful rhythm to the gentle rocking of the boat. There was a contented buzz of noise coming from all of her guests, and it had been some time since Pirate Pizza's had been this full. She might have had a ship that was not the cleanest in the world, but she could cook a mean meal and cope with the scores of customers. Everything was going according to plan, and she couldn't believe her luck. All of this changed at dusk, almost as if someone had switched off a light. First one table, and then another, started to shout and scream about the food being spoiled. She couldn't believe it. She had done everything right. Everything was in place, and all of the food had been so good. The party of refined and distinguished gentlemen had been so complimentary, and had even asked to look at the kitchen. They had complimented her on her fine food and the way that she had the taste of her pizzas just right. Not too savoury and not too sweet. A customer walked straight up to her and said, "Your food is upside down. The pizza is as sweet as honey, and the hot chocolate is as sour as a bacon butty. I'm not paying for any of your rubbish, and I hope your balloon bursts and your boat sinks." She tried to apologise, but all of the customers were screaming as they put on their coats and left. The dream of being the best Italian restaurant in town was vanishing before her very eyes and ears. Everyone had left, and the room was empty. She went up to the top deck to look out at the night sky and sea and the river's mouth. When she reached the top deck, she could see that there was a man standing there. He had a slow, small, sad smile on his lips. He had been one of the group of men who had wanted to see the kitchen. Before she had a chance to ask him who he was, he spoke to her, never taking his eyes from hers. "I'm very sorry it had to be like this, but I'd seen you swapping my salt and sugars, and I thought that I would do the same to you, just to see how you liked a salty taste of your own sweet medicine." He was trying not to, but he had a smile in his voice, and she could see that he was a man who was no stranger to laughing. She wanted to sail away from this place and never come back, knowing that she had now been found out. This owner of another restaurant, as old as her, spoke again. "It is hard to make a living in this town. So many restaurants and so few people. But I think you went about it the wrong way." She felt very uncomfortable and couldn't think of anything that she could say that would make it right. He continued, "You've got a lot of good food that you can cook, but—" He looked at the grimy tables and broken chairs on her boat. "But this isn't the best-looking restaurant in the world or in this town. Now, I've got a good restaurant, but my food isn't as good as yours." His smile had become as broad as it had ever been in the whole of his long life. He scratched at his chin and walked a small pace towards her. "So why not stop this sabotaging, and we could join forces, and you could cook in my restaurant, and maybe together we'll do better than we can do on our own." She could see the sense of them working together. He would have better food, and she would have a better restaurant. And over the weeks that followed, the two of them went for walks in the park together. And even now, he is as sweet as she is salty. But he never lets her sort out the sugar shakers or the salt cellars. In the middle of Manhattan there was a happy princess that had everything that she wanted. Many would say that she had too many clothes. She had never had a chance to count them, but she had a new dress or outfit for every day of her life for the 16 years of her life. She'd been born in Asia, and her mother and father had left to go to America when she was just a baby. She would ask them not to buy her any more clothes, but they would tell her that you could never have too many dresses or clothes. All she wanted was to be happy and to find love that wasn't measured in money or things that you could have. "Mother and father," her voice was firm and calm, "please do not buy me any more things. I do not need them. And in the country of my birth, people have so little and we have so much. I do not want to have anything. I do not need anything." They would smile at her and think that it was just a phase that she was going through, and every day there would be another piece of clothing lying on her bed. Almost as if they had listened to what she was saying, there was a quiet time, and the king and queen were not to be seen. Within a week, she could hear whispers in the corridors, and she realised that her parents were trying to think of a way of telling her that she would soon have 2 new baby sisters. Of course, the princess was very happy for her mother and father, the king and queen, but even happier to know that she would be left alone while they were so busy with her new sisters. With a little more time to herself, she wondered what she could do with all of her time. The only thing that she knew about were dresses and clothes. She knew all about how they were cut and stitched and what it was that people liked about fashion. She took it into her mind to become a designer, and she knew that with her fame as a princess, she would be able to make a lot of money. It wasn't always easy, but she tried and never gave up while her parents brought up her sisters. With the wealth that she made from her fashion shows, she could send money back to the people of her country to help them to grow crops and re-establish farms and industry. Just when she thought that she would be happy, all of her fame got the attention of the papers, and they started to criticise her appearance at fashion shows. They would write about the way that she would be seen wearing the same clothes at a number of premieres. She found that the only release from the relentless attention of the press was to hide away in the country. The only release she got was to go to the farm and enjoy the hens running after her. It all reminded her of home, and she was glad that she could help the people of a country who were so far away. One day she forgot to change her clothes, and she had beautiful sandals on her dainty feet, and she got so dirty, but she just was not bothered. She thought that it was fun to be away from designers and the press. As she looked around her, she could see that it was not just the people from far away that needed help. When she looked on the clothesline of the nearby farms, she could see that they were not even clothes. They were rags. She knew that the people in the local village would be too proud to take money, and rather than sell the clothes that she had kept since she was a child, she replaced the clothes on the line and took the rags away. When she got home, she found a warty frog in one of the dusty pockets. She picked it up and spoke to herself. "Go on, kiss that frog. It is a frog, and I am a princess." She was half joking with herself and dared herself to kiss it. She was frightened that she would turn into a frog herself, or what would she do with a prince with a warty green back? So she was relieved when she kissed it. It jumped into the pond by her feet. The frog reminded her of the happiness that she found when she was away from the fashion shows and the press. It gave her an idea to make a special pocket in all of her dresses to hold a frog, safe and sound and away from the lights and noise. When she would appear on the catwalk, many of the audience would laugh and giggle at the fact that some of her dresses would move with the frog beneath the material. But she would never say anything to anyone. She would have an enigmatic smile on her face and say nothing. She really loved her sisters and her mother, and never told them that she was giving her dresses away. She was giving them away day by day to those people who needed them much more than she ever could. With time, if you were ever to find a quiet time in the middle of Manhattan, you would hear a wildlife garden filled with frogs in a rooftop sanctuary, with a princess who knows that she is helping people on both sides of the world. I could hear my own voice as I spoke into the dusty phone of the new house. He wasn't very pleased at all. He went red. He was embarrassed. But it all seemed to go quite well. Oh, and by the way, thanks for the housewarming present. It'll go lovely in the bathroom. I was trying desperately not to put on my posh telephone voice. But with her doing so well, I couldn't stop myself from talking in that very strange way that I do whenever I have to talk to my older sister. I knew it was going to be my sister's birthday in less than a week, and now that we had moved further away with the new job, I wanted to get her something special. I've got you a present that I know you'll love. I don't want to say too much, but it will look gorgeous. It will look gorgeous around your neck. Oh, now I've given the game away. Sorry about that. If there was anyone who shouldn't be given a secret, then it's me. I am hopeless with anything that I am not supposed to tell anyone else. And now, apart from drawing her a picture, I had just about told her exactly what I was giving her. I could hear her sigh that older sister sigh and say, "You are hopeless with secrets. I'm going to put the phone down now before you tell me any more. You know how I like to be surprised. I'll speak to you later about the final arrangements and picking Mother up. Bye." Well, it was a necklace. A silver necklace with "Sister" written in rubies. We had seen the necklace when we were younger and had always talked about it. When we were children, we had always said that we had never been happier and that this was the ideal place for us to live. I'd always wanted to move there since the holiday, and now I had, living in this fine house as big as a mansion. I remember looking around at all of the boxes, some of them opened and some of them filled with things that would never be used again, but we couldn't bear to throw them away. Moving was such a great thing. Bigger house, better job, living by the side of the sea, in a place that had always been a dream and a reminder of the past. As I looked at the mess and pyramids of boxes, I could see a red leather photo album. It was jammed full with memories of our childhood. There was a black and white photo of Mother. She was silly, clumsy and active, and would roller skate to school and make her way through the town, much to my embarrassment. Looking at that old image made me think about my own behaviour and the way that I might have embarrassed some of my family. In another pile of photographs I saw our mother was dressed like a clown. It would have been funny if this was the only time that she did it. But every week she would have some strange get-up on. It was the group of baby pictures that I noticed next, and when I saw a picture of Katie when she was only a baby lying in a birthday suit on a rug in front of the fireplace in Georgia Villas, it was then that I had an idea. I thought that I could make a fantastic birthday card of her with the baby photo, her on the hearth, in a birthday suit on a rug. She'd love it. When it was the day of the party, we all dressed weirdly. Mother, as always, dressed in a candy-striped trousers big enough for a circus. Even Katie had on some glittering shoes as long as your arm. It was only her nephew and my son that dressed as a human being. He had on a three-piece suit, and he only changed into a flower costume when he had to bring the cake in. The flower costume was covered so that he'd made it himself with sharp thorns. It was covered with sharp thorns to make sure that all of the aunts and grandparents couldn't get close enough to kiss and ruffle his hair. As I had thought, Katie just loved the necklace, and we had a little bit of a tear over the ideas that we had had as girls and how we had seen the necklace all those years ago. Our crying and joyful reminiscing was brought to an end when Mother fell asleep. Her snoring could be heard in the next county and far out to sea. Without a word, we all, and I mean all, descended on her sleeping figure. All of her children and grandchildren began to paint eyes and noses and warts and moustaches on her, including open eyes on her closed eyelids. When she did awake, none of us said a thing, and made sure that she didn't get to glance at herself in the hall mirror, and they all made to go. Everyone said that it had been a great success, and they were pleased that the move, the job, and the new school were all going so well. Some of us sniggered to let grandmother go home looking such a sight. At the end of the day, I could talk to my son, and I realised that we are an embarrassing family. I turned and told him that I was so proud of all of the things that he had done and how well he'd fitted in. I can remember smiling at him and saying that he might be grown up, but he would always be my Snotty. His reply will always stay with me. If I'm your Snotty, well then that makes you Big Snotty Seddon.